ROUVY Unchained.
Hello and welcome to ROUVY Unchained. I'm your host, Zach Nehr, and today we are taking you inside one of Europe's most popular cycling destinations. I am very excited about this episode because I have heard so much about this location. I have never been myself, but I've heard stories from years and years and years. So I'm very, very excited to learn more about this. So today we have Lee Bibring from Love Velo. Welcome to the show, Lee. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Nice to be here, Zach.
So, as I said, I've never been to Tenerife before, but I've heard about it for so long. And me being in the US, it's something that is pretty far away. And even for Europeans, it's probably a little bit far compared to just driving somewhere for a training camp. So can you
Yep.
give us a little bit of an introduction to Tenerife?
Yeah, of course. Funnily enough, Tenerife is, whilst it's quite isolated and remote, because it's literally an island in the middle of the Atlantic. It's really well served from Europe, so it actually becomes a really popular destination. And actually, it became a popular destination in the UK with non-cyclists back in the 70s and 80s. So it became this kind of sprawling destination where, if I'm honest, it got a pretty bad rep back in the 70s and 80s. And gradually over time, and I think there's a lot of credit to the Tenerife Tourist Board as well, and the Spanish government, they've really kind of focused in on activity sport, just because, I mean, they've got a volcano that's sitting in the middle of the ocean that is perfect for hiking, climbing, and obviously for us cyclists for cycling.
Wow. So you mentioned the volcano. So can you
Mm,
describe what the island is like? Is it one big
yes.
volcano or is it a volcano and then a city surrounded by water? Is that what it's like?
It's almost as exactly, if you look at it on a map, it's almost exactly as you'd imagine it if you were to draw it. So it is, and if you fly over it, it's incredible as you come to fly into the, especially Tenerife South Airport. You fly to the west, I think it is, of the volcano, and you get the most fabulous view, especially if it's a cloudy day, because you see the peak above the cloud, and as you kind of land, you kind of get a view of this incredible volcano sort of sprawling out of the ocean. The reason that we love it is because it's almost, as I say, it's like a 50-kilometer unbroken climb. So it is a giant volcano in the middle of the island, and it's not the same, funnily enough, as quite a lot of the archipelago, where you have Gran Canaria, which is similar but not quite as high, and Lanzarote, which is a much more undulating island and very, very popular with triathletes. So it's a completely, I would say, almost a unique island for cycling. It is just a volcano that just fires up from the middle of the island, and all around the coast you're just looking up.
Wow. So is this something where, I mean, it sounds really cool. Sounds like, yeah, a
Mm.
volcano. I mean, I'm sure the scenery is so unique and amazing, but is it something where once you've been once or twice, is it kind of the same, or are there a lot of different roads and climbs?
A question we get asked often. So ultimately, there are about five, I think, 5 ways up Mount Tidy. Um, Most people stay in the southwest because that's kind of the busiest area, and it's well served by most airlines. And you want to climb, you can either climb the western ascent from Adeje, or you can climb from right in the south in El Medano, or the most popular is from Los Cristianos, Playa de las Americas, and you go via Villaflor, which is, I think it actually is the highest town in Spain. So most people will go from the southwest, but actually the routes are relatively different. So if you were to ride from the western ascent up towards from Adeje, you go through a place called, my pronunciation is going to be horrendous, so don't hold me to this, but a place called Guia de Zora, where you get a very, very different climate from the coast, which is maybe 5 or 6 kilometers beneath it, and you climb through the banana plantations, which honestly are spectacular. Whereas if you were to climb from the south, like in El Medano, it can be a little bit more barren. So ultimately, when you get to the crater, and that's a good, depending on how good you are as a rider, that's 4 or 5 hours of riding. It can be relatively similar at the top of the crater, but actually the routes are relatively different. And there are other routes that you don't just have to do Mount Tidy. We talk to our customers all the time about this. You cannot miss the north of the island, a place called Masca. It's personally one of my favorite rides on the island. So ultimately, yes, it can be a little samey, but actually, if you get out of the towns, you see some spectacular scenery, and it can be different on each ascent of the climb.
So you mentioned 4 or 5 hours to get to the top of the climb.
Oh,
Is
oh,
that for like the average cyclist? Is this something that only serious cyclists can kind of handle these routes? Because is it just up and down the mountain all day? Those are the only options.
It is. I don't want to pretend otherwise because it's a hell of a climb. It's effectively almost 50 kilometers of unbroken ascent. So um, you can do your own math as to how quickly you climb. I think I'm not sure. I think Chris Froome holds the KOM up the western ascent. I think in some absolutely astronomical time, I think averaging 25 kilometers an hour or something crazy. Um, you need to be. I wouldn't want to sugarcoat it. You need to be fit. You need to have trained, and whatever ascent you do, you're going to be climbing. Just sort of almost from the moment you get on your bike. The descent is fabulous. It's honestly, the roads are so well maintained, and it's like that it's not particularly technical actually. You've got very long descents, probably from about as moment you come off the crater all the way down. And in fact, you've got to be keep your wits about you because it's a fast descent. But I would say you have to be, even if you're not a really great cyclist, you have to have trained. So there are plenty of our cyclists who I wouldn't say are fabulous riders, but they want a challenge and they want to train for something.
Is this something where are there sections of the climb that are really steep, or is it kind of more gradual, maybe 4 or 5% most of the way, maybe a steep section or two? Is it something that like a generally fit cyclist could handle, or are there long sections of like 10, 11%?
Yeah, no, it's not the gradient that's the killer. It's the time. It's just incessant climbing. So you have to get into that rhythm. You have. Well, funnily enough, when I rode it, I was suffering probably about 2 hours up, and I had a guy who must have been, I don't know, 30 years older than me, just flying past me, told me, come in my slipstream. You've got to basically just take this in sections, and you've just got to put out a certain wattage for the next 10 minutes, and then you can have a little bit of a break, and you need to split it up like that. So it's not as though you're hitting 10-15% sections all the way up. It's just relentless. Although when you want to be careful, don't go through the very small villages that sort of branch off of the main road because they are extremely steep. And if you make a mistake and accidentally just come off the main road, even just to go and get a snack or something, if you haven't quite hit the main part of the climb, you can hit some majorly steep roads.
Has this ever happened to you before, where you went into one of
Yes.
those towns you had to
Yeah.
turn around and you come back up this wall?
Zach, if I didn't have to turn around, I basically fell off the bike. I wasn't moving. But no, generally, it's not a particularly, it's not, as I say, it's not a technical climb. I wouldn't say it's a particularly technical descent. It's just relentless because it's non-stop climbing from the moment you leave the coast.
Is this something where on the descents it's kind of long and steady? Like, are you pedaling at all on the descent, or are you coasting for if it's that long to get up, are you just coasting for an hour or two to get down?
Funnily enough, yeah. I mean, I've only descended. I've descended twice. I've descended the Western Ascent, which it's pretty much a straight section all the way down, and well, straight section for maybe like 5 or 6 k, and then it bends around and then heads down to Guia de Sora. If you come from the other way, which is towards the east, and then head down to where I said Villa Flor, um, there's a few more twists and turns, but you are freewheeling a lot of the way. And the reason I sort of, I kind of half joke, but we do tell our community to be really careful, is you can pick up some serious speed without kind of really knowing it. And you've still got traffic coming up that road. It's one road up to the crater. If you've whatever road you're on, it's not as though you're branching off. So you've got to keep your wits about you. Make sure that you're riding very much within your kind of capability. Watch your speed and ensure that your bike has got disc brakes.
So you mentioned the cars there. What is it like with traffic, and how much does that change kind of throughout the year depending on the season?
Um, so I would say excuse me, when you're on the coast, it's undoubtedly busy. Um, it's especially sort of around Los Cristianos, Playa de las Americas, even up into Costa Rica and the towns that are up on that western coast. It's busy and you get a lot of traffic pretty much all year. Even in the winter, you get a lot of traffic just because it's so beautiful weather out there. Um, the TF1 is the main road, which I think it goes almost the entire perimeter of the island except for the northern section. And if you wanted me to talk about the northern section, I could talk to ends of the world on that part of the island. I love it so much. But once you get past the TF1, so you go underneath it, you kind of come out onto what are local roads and local traffic. So the traffic will ease as you go up the climb. There are always kind of those tour buses because you get a lot of people who want to go up to the crater, and even go up to the very top of the mountain, sorry, top of the volcano. So you will get relatively large levels of traffic in the real peak seasons. But I would say once you cross that TF1, which is the perimeter road, you're out onto pretty much local traffic. And most people are so used to cyclists that by and large, I do say it by and large, most people, especially the locals, are pretty good with the cyclists, and make sure they drive sensibly around the riders.
You mentioned the northern part of the island. I definitely want to hear more about that. What is it about that that is so different and so special for you?
Someone asked me that. I rode there. I had never been there until 2024. I think it was this time last year or so. Um, and I'd never been up there. And I really just wanted to ride and see what it was like, because someone said to me, and they said to me, it's like being in like Utah in the States, or Death Valley. They said there's nothing around. It's completely barren. And because it's Tenerife, and my experience of Tenerife has been in relatively large towns, and you go up to the volcano, of course, that's a fabulous ride, but you're still staying in a relatively populous place. I went up to a place called Santiago del Tede, which is in the north, and it's almost like, the only way I can kind of describe it, it's the last town before nothing. It's completely barren. You climb to the top of it's actually a relatively busy road up from Buena Vista del Norte, because sorry, Santiago de Teli, because it's got a lot of local traffic. But you then descend to the northern coast, and it's what I imagine Tenerife must have been like 100 years ago. It's banana plantations, small hamlets, tiny villages, the most beautiful coastline, and it's because it's so barren. You get waves crashing off the Atlantic, just crashing off the rock, and you don't see anybody for certainly no tourists. You don't see anybody for just hours. It's just phenomenal up there.
Oh, that sounds a lot like you mentioned Utah. I've definitely done some riding out in like New Mexico and Arizona, where
Mm.
once you get outside the city and then you're just 10, 20 miles outside of town, there's no more cell phone reception and there's just these houses kind of scattered. There's no road signs, there's no like
Well,
stores or anything like that.
that's exactly. Have you ever heard of a place called Masca? Because
I have
that
not.
is,
No.
whoever is listening to this podcast, they must do the Masca Wall. So you do the ride that I kind of mentioned from Santiago del Tede, and you can do a loop. So you go along, you go along that northern coast, and then you climb up to a place called Masca. When you think there's a brilliant lookout, and when you think you've kind of topped out, you then descend a little bit further, and then it's called the Masca Wall, and it's absolutely relentless. I don't know off the top of my head, I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's in certain places it must be 15 to 20%, and it is brutal. And it's exactly as you say. There's no phone reception. There is nothing in sight. There's nowhere to get food. There's nowhere to get drink. You have to be properly yeah, prepared to be doing that ride. It's the most phenomenal ride, phenomenal place to cycle, and most people just don't see that, because they go to Tenerife and think, "Oh, I'm going to do Mount Tidy," and it's like the famous climb, and I'll do, I don't know, if I'm there for 5 days, I'll do two ascents, and then I'll do a couple of coastal rides. We always tell our riders, you can't miss it. It's just phenomenal.
So, can you tell me again where that is on the island and how far around is the island? Like, is it unreasonable to do a loop in a day? Would that be like way too long
Oh
of a
yeah,
ride?
yeah. You don't. Yeah, no, you couldn't do a loop in the. Well, I couldn't do a loop in the day. No, it's it's relatively far. The area I'm talking about is in the north, very northwest of the island, um, and because it's just because of the geography of Tenerife, it's a really tough ride. Even just to go from the southwest to the northwest to do that loop and back would be, I'm guessing, because I haven't got it in front of me, there's got to be 4,000 meters of climbing. It would be an epic day in the saddle. And as I say, you've got to be fully prepared. So what a lot of our riders do is they will get a transfer to Santiago del Tedi, and then they'll do that loop, and it means that they're more likely to be fully prepared and enjoy that ride, because the very worst thing you can do, and I have a little bit of experience of this, is be in the northern coast and run out of gas a little bit because you're not getting home. You're just not getting home. And not only are you not getting home, you're not getting a cab. So it's really important to make sure you're joking aside. I think you probably end up having to get a hotel on the northern coast. We always tell our riders, unless you are a very strong rider and you've fully prepared and you're starting at, I don't know, 7 o'clock in the morning, go to Santiago de Tede and do that loop. And if you want to create more of a ride, there is honestly some of the most fantastic scenery. You can go past, it's still on the northern coast, to a place past Buena Vista del Norte, to a place called Punta del Teno, which is a lighthouse in the very northwestern tip of the island. In fact, if they filmed what film was it? Fast and Furious down there. So
Whoa.
yeah, and it's exactly as you'd imagine. Single track road, just incredible scenery, cliffs plunging into the Atlantic, and then it goes all the way down to the lighthouse. That again, you've got to be very well prepared, because when you get to the lighthouse, that again, there is nothing around. Like you have to be self-sufficient with food, water, sun cream, supplies, you name it, because it's pretty remote down there, but it's beautiful, and it's where most people just don't see.
Yeah, so I want to hear more about the preparation for these big rides because, as you said, it's very deserted and spread out in many, many different places. Is there anything specifically that you recommend? Do you have like a Tenerife checklist for the things that you should bring on every ride just to be prepared?
Yeah, I mean, on our website, we've got plenty of top tips for riding Tenerife. Ultimately, you need to be able to make sure that the ride that you have got planned is, as I say, well, planned is the word. It's got to be fully planned. So we've got a curated list of routes that we provide people, but fundamentally, you need to look at those before you go. You need to make sure that you're confident that you can do the distance, that you are prepared for the amount of climbing. And the reason I say that is that if you were to do that, I'm talking about Masca particularly, if you were to do Mount Tidy, ultimately, even if you kind of bonked on the climb, you could turn round. You could turn around and come home. Whereas somewhere like Masca, which is pretty remote, you couldn't do that. In terms of sort of checklist, the sun is ferocious as you get higher up. It doesn't always feel that hot, which is bizarre in the middle of the Atlantic, an island in the Atlantic. It's called the island Tenerife is called the island of eternal spring. So it's because of the winds and because of the relatively temperate climate. It doesn't ever always feel that hot. It's not like you're climbing in 30 degrees, but it can be ferocious if you're out on the road for 4.5 hours sweating buckets as you're climbing. So yeah, lots of water, lots of food, and make sure you don't forget that, in American parlance, sunscreen.
Yes, definitely. I want to hear more about the weather and the altitude and how much that
Mm.
can really affect your ride because yeah, because how high do some of these climbs get? I mean, if you're climbing for that long, I'm sure you're going up over probably 1,500, 2,000 meters at least.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the climb. I think I'm not sure the top of the crater, but it's somewhere in the region of 2,028. I think it is 2,800. And you're climbing from literally from the sea, so you're climbing pretty much every meter of that ascent. Um, in terms of the altitude, funnily enough, a lot. It's a good base for a lot of pro teams, but they don't stay on the coast. They stay at altitude. So I can't remember. There's a hotel which the name escapes me, but it's right on the crater, and you'll find a lot of the riders will stay up there for the benefit of the altitude training, and also not to. They don't want to stay in the middle of a town, I guess. So yeah, it's a tough ride from an altitude perspective, from a weather perspective, and from just the sheer amount of climbing.
So with the weather, how much does that change throughout the year? Would you say there's a like a best time of year to go versus is there a time that's ever unrideable because it's too hot? I know some other locations, maybe in Spain, like in the summer, it's just too hot to go there in
Yeah.
July or something like that.
So we don't listen. Ultimately, we don't have many riders in July and August because it's the summer. But it's not the same as mainland Spain. So if you were to go to, let's say, Andalusia, or let's say a more cycling destination like Calpe or Girona, it can be swelteringly hot in the middle of the summer. It's not quite the same in Tenerife. You do get days where it is like that, but by and large, as I say, it's called the island of eternal spring because you kind of have this spring climate quite a lot of the year round. So it doesn't get sort of ferociously hot. We have riders going deep into May who will ride into Tenerife. Best time, in my personal view, is right at the end of uh, November or January, February. And that's mainly because if I look out my window today, it's dark, it's miserable, and I love the idea of being able to cycle in 25, well, not probably not 25 at that time, but 22-degree, beautiful sunshine. So we always recommend our riders to go to places like Tenerife first, almost like the winter sun.
And with the going back to the altitude, is that something
Mm.
that you would say like the average fit rider can handle? Is that something that you would ever need to prepare for to go to ride at that altitude every day if you're going for a 3 or 4 or 5 day trip?
Uh, my personal view is I think that all if you're prepared enough to do the climb and you're fit enough to do the climb, I'm not sure the altitude will take it out of you that much. I mean, ultimately, it will deplete your energy levels, but it's not as though you need to prepare for it by staying at altitude or anything like that. Ultimately, when you get over a certain distance, you're going to find that maybe it's slightly harder to get the oxygen in and to recover, but I wouldn't say that you need to. I think, listen, most of our riders are just sort of regular club riders and amateur riders who just want a challenge. They're not going to spend thousands of pounds on staying at altitude or preparing beforehand. They just are either sitting on their turbo trainer or they're out on the roads and they're preparing for a ride.
And do you have specific places that you recommend they stay? Because
Mm.
this is a mistake that I've made going to altitude before where I was just completely new to the whole idea where I was going to a place that I knew had high altitude, so I knew I was going to climb up high, but I thought I was staying down low, but I accidentally ended up staying in a house that I didn't realize it was almost at 2,000 meters. So
Oh,
then
wow.
a week in, I felt horrible and I was so tired.
Yeah.
And then I learned all this stuff like years later. I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I was just way too high. I was just sleeping at altitude and then training at altitude and not recovering at all.
Not recovering at all. I've had to say it's putting your body through the ringer for about a week. No, all of our riders stay on the southwest. We send so many cyclists to Tenerife, and we do so much work with the local government there that we have great rates with the best cycling friendly hotels. What we always tell our riders to do is my team are full of this kind of knowledge, but cycling friendly hotel, but ultimately near one of our really recommended bike hire places, mainly because those guys live and breathe the island. They know every route, they know everything about their bikes, and it's not as though you need sort of regular maintenance on the bike, but it's a great kind of cycling culture. The further you stay out, the more you get to sort of a bit more almost like European package holidays, and that's not a particularly enjoyable experience if you're going out there to ride. Although it depends, some people do want a little bit of nightlife, and if you want to do that, there are certain places you can stay for that. But ultimately, the southwest is still it's very busy, still very touristy. If you want to, at the end of the day, go for a meal and a drink, there are thousands of places to do that in Tenerife. Um, it really depends on what you want from your holiday ultimately.
So yeah, with those two different places to stay or those kind of different vibes and kind of accommodations that you would get, if someone was going with, let's say they're going with their family, so like their
Mm.
family doesn't ride bikes, but they want to go and they want to ride their bike 4 hours a day, is
Yep.
that something where would you recommend they stay so that they could have that balance and also have the good riding and just have a good experience for everyone there?
We have so many people who do that because it's such a fabulous destination, especially in the winter. If you want to get away from for some winter sunshine, and I'm the perfect example. The last time I went, my wife is not a cyclist, and frankly, just wanted a little bit of R&R whilst we left our three kids with the grandparents at home. We stayed in, I think it's a place called La Caleta, which is just north of Adeje. Beautiful little town. It's relatively busy and touristy, but there are also some amazing local restaurants. I went out and I rode for a few hours a day, came back. The swimming pools are fantastic. There aren't that many, there are beaches obviously on the southwest, but what's beautiful about a lot of the hotels is they have I think they're called endless swimming pools, where you can just almost look out straight over the ocean. And the beauty of also staying in the southwest is when you're looking straight ahead of you, there's an island called La Gomera, which is directly in front of you. And it's got its own little microclimate. You've got the clouds that just sit above the island. It's the most fantastic view. So we have so many families who go out there where maybe the husband or the wife will ride, or the partner will stay at home, or I don't know, go hiking or go running or whatever it might be. There's so many options. Um, it's just the perfect place. We don't tell families to to sort of do the traditional family riding there in Tenerife, because you are either ascending or descending. I think that's probably quite an important distinction.
I was just gonna ask, are there any even short, just flat sections of road, maybe along the coast, maybe just a few kilometers where you could get the family out, or it's just all up and down everywhere?
So it's all up and down everywhere. You could there are I said, ultimately there are roads that are along the coast, and they have the beach, not the beachfront, the sort of the promenade which goes around. Um, you can kind of, actually, I'm not sure if bikes are even allowed on that promenade. They're so busy that you wouldn't want to cycle. They're beautiful for just having a wander just down and having. I mean, you've got the Atlantic on your right and you've got restaurants on your left. I mean, it's the most fabulous thing to do as the sun goes down and you're sort of going out for a meal. So that from that perspective, it's great. We wouldn't encourage sort of children or even cyclists who just aren't that capable of riding there, because it's really unpleasant to be ascending and descending when you are not expecting that. So whilst I wouldn't want to ever put anybody off, you need to ensure that you go to the place that is most suited to your ability. So there are plenty of places to do that. Tenerife is pretty much suited to those who want to ride, train, and climb, I guess.
Yeah, so is this something where if a cyclist was going there for maybe a little bit longer of a trip, like at least a week or two, they're gonna have some rest days in there where maybe they just do an hour-long spin or just no ride at all? What do cyclists typically do on a rest day? Because I imagine there's probably good hiking, but you probably wouldn't want to do that. It would be a little bit too hard. Is it kind of just walking around the town, some shops or museums or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely not there aren't any museums that I know of. You would go. Listen, the hiking is phenomenal, but you'd have to get up to the crater to do that. You couldn't just walk there. You'd have to probably get a trouncer up there. So that would be a pretty intense day, I imagine. I've never done that myself, but honestly, some of the hotels have got, well, I say some, a lot of the hotels have got great gyms that are honestly, they're overlooking the Atlantic. So we have riders who often go there and they'll have a day off and they'll spend, I don't know, an hour doing a little bit of gym work or yoga in front of sorry, literally in front of La Gomera, directly in front of them, with the Atlantic just sort of sprawling. It's the most beautiful place to kind of relax. And a lot of people just want to just almost chill out on that rest day. So there are always things to do, and there are so many kind of restaurants and bars to walk around. It's not like a traditional European city where it's like sort of like a cobbled square and then you're sort of walking around the walls or whatever like that. It doesn't, it's almost like coastal towns sort of sprawling all the way along that coast. But it's a lovely, the promenade especially is really lovely, just to take a wander down. Just, you could walk, I presume you could probably just walk for about 20, 30 miles all the way around. But I've never done that. I've walked a really lovely section of that and just gone for a drink at the end of the evening. It's a nice place to do that.
That sounds amazing. I have heard a lot of stories from pros who've gone to Tenerife where, and this is probably, it might be because they're staying in a different place or they're staying
Mm.
higher up on the mountain, where they just do their training for the day, they come back, they just sit at the hotel and there's nothing to do. Like they just kind of sit in their room, watch some local TV because not there might not even be Wi-Fi. Are these stories a bit outdated? Is it newer nowadays, or is it just the difference between staying in one of these coastal towns or coastal cities versus staying higher up on the mountain where they're probably doing a block of altitude training away from the big city?
It's exactly that. It's where you stay. So there are still hotels where you can do that, and I imagine that their teams or trainers are encouraging them to do that and not being out in town. If you stay up on the mountain, even if you stay in Villa Flor, which is sort of almost like the gateway to the crater, um, there's not much to do. I'm not going to pretend there's anything to do. It's very, very local. Everything will be closed by about 9:30, other than kind of the locals just sitting around having a drink. There's not a lot to do. If you stay on the coast, there's plenty to do. So it's really a question of what you would rather have on your vacation. I think if you're going there as a pro and you're going there with one specific purpose to train, uh, yeah, I guess you'd want to stay on the mountain. Sorry, on the volcano. But we don't encourage anybody to do that just because you miss out on everything else, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be the ideal trip for a professional cyclist whose job and full focus in life is cycling and nothing else.
Precisely. Exactly. We cater to all types of riders, but ultimately, we're an experience business. We want people to experience everything there is that you can enjoy in Tenerife. So if you were just to stay on literally just in the crater, for example, you would miss Masca because you'd have to go all the way to the bottom, then you'd have to go all the way up to Santiago de Tede, and that isn't today's ride really, unless you're an incredible rider and you start very, very early. We just we think it's a better thing to do to be staying on the coast. And then you've got, as I say, you've got 3 or 4 ascents from the southwest. You can get a transfer up to Santiago de Tede and do the whole northwest, or if you're a really strong rider, you can ride from the southwest to there. We would always encourage people to do that. And also there's farm, if you're more self-sufficient and you've got your own bike, you've got your own training program, again, yeah, I get that, and you stay up at altitude. All of the bike hire shops, all of the routes start from the coast. Just kind of the buzz of Tenerife is all from the coastal towns.
Yeah, with everything that Love Velo does and helps provide, can
Mm.
you tell me a little bit more about the flights? Is that something that are there direct flights from the bigger cities in Europe? And then is that something where is the airport close to town where you can just get a taxi from the airport to accommodation? Is that something that's pretty close?
Yeah, so yeah, the flight there are flights to Tenerife pretty much daily. When you're in the height of the season, it will be more than that. Um, Most of the airlines flying to Tenerife South, I would say it's a 20-minute drive, depending on traffic, to the southwest coast towns. We've got transfers that you can do. Again, we cater to all types of budgets. So we've obviously got lovely private transfers, but also we have shuttle transfers. So if someone wants to get out there and really, really on a budget and they just want to focus on the cycling and they're not really that interested in any of the kind of the luxury, or not even the luxury, but they just want to keep the costs down. We've got group transfers which sort of run. I think they depart the airport every hour or so, so you have a little bit more of a wait. But if you're prepared to do that and you're on a bit more of a budget, that's a great way of keeping costs down, but still managing to get to your accommodation only sort of 20 minutes after the bus departs. But to be honest with you, it's so close. We just think arrive, we'll sort you out your transfer, you go there. If you go to the north, that's a different matter. A few airlines do fly into Tenerife North, and that's a big, I think that's like about an hour to most of those hotels. So you don't fly into Tenerife North really unless you're staying on the northern coast. And if you're staying on the northern coast, that's a very different experience, as I said, to the southwest.
Yeah, is this something where once you're at your accommodation or at your hotel, is it pretty walkable to go get food and groceries, especially if you're there for more than a week for a longer trip?
Oh, absolutely. In the southwest, absolutely. There's shops, restaurants, cafes, bars, you name it, all over. Uh, North West Coast, very, very little, but most people don't really stay there. But and again, if you're on the crater, no, there's nothing. But yeah, it's the kind of place that is fully catered for everybody on a vacation, whether that's people who come there for cycling or people who just go there for a bit of rest and relaxation.
Oh man, this is something that always bothers me being in the US and visiting all these American cities. And you fly in and you get to the hotel in downtown, and it's like, here's the number one thing we got to do. It's a museum. Oh, it's 5 miles away. It's like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah. Well, I was in the States for a family holiday, and I realised that your country is a lot bigger than mine. Every time we do anything in Europe, it's a short hop across on a flight. Tenerife is about 4.5 hours. So it's not insubstantial from Europe, but even then, it's 4.5 hours to an island in the middle of the Atlantic, completely isolated from anything else in the beautiful sunshine. So it's really, it's not that far.
Wow. Yeah, I've been on so many trips in the US where you go to one of these big cities and then you're staying on this side of town and then you pick out this great looking restaurant on the other side of town. It's like, oh, it can't be that far. And then in the car it says 45-minute drive. It's like so far away.
Yeah, again, if you're staying in the southwest, you got none of those issues. Everything is it's pretty much on your doorstep. So it's dead easy.
I think that you've seen it change a lot in the last few years, or have you heard about it changing much is it quickly evolving? Are there lots of new buildings coming up, or is it something that is kind of more steady?
No, I'd say it's steady because Tenerife, that area, especially in the southwest, was sort of developed in the 70s. What Tenerife and a lot of Tenerife are under a bit of pressure from um, the local population to ensure that their tourism is sustainable, and the sustainable tourism that they want to bring in is the hiking and the cycling, and people who discover they don't just discover a beach, a hotel, and go home again. They discover the rest of the island and they spend money in the local towns. So I would say that there's been a huge focus, especially since I'd say about 2017, 2018, on activity vacations in Tenerife. It got vaguely remember getting it very. We got a lot of inquiries. And it got very popular when I think Chris Froome did a photo shoot for Cyclist magazine, staying at altitude, funnily enough. And actually, the photographer he's Love Velo's photographer. That's how we know him. And I remember getting just there were so many inquiries. I didn't know Tenerife you could ride for that long, or it was that beautiful. I just assumed it was package holidays. So you can see that kind of the more popular activity holidays growing, but I would say it's been there for a fair amount of time.
Is it with all the trips that you've done, do you have a favorite restaurant or coffee shop that you recommend in Tenerife?
Um, it's a good question. It's a very good question because a lot of the time, I tell you what, I do. I do. I was just thinking a lot of the time I'm sort of getting supplies and then I'm going up, I'm going to do a climb. There is a great cafe and it's called Parada. I think it's called Parada, Parada, I think, in Santiago del Tede. And it's the last bar before you get to the end of effectively the end of the road, and then that road goes on that loop, which is, as I say, pretty desolate and barren. And I had a drink in there with the owner. I think this must have been last year on my way home, and we ended up staying for a couple of extra ones, and then getting a cab back rather than riding back. That was great. You know what? I love the local bars. I love local restaurants. So in the heart of Los Cristianos or Playa de las Americas, no, I wouldn't. There aren't any particular bars or restaurants that I particularly love, and that's because they're relatively busy and touristy. But the restaurants and the bars that are there's a great, I can't remember the name of it. There's a great restaurant in Villa Flor, and as I say that, I think it's called Parada. I might be doing it disservice, but I think it's called Parada in Santiago del Tede. It is typically Canarian. It's just wonderful. You're hanging out with the locals on their island, just enjoying a beer. It's a lovely way to spend a day or an hour.
Sounds awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. Quick note to our listeners, the routes of Tenerife are actually available on ROUVY, so you can go on and ride the island from the comfort of your own home. I, for one, will definitely check these out because I love these hilly, challenging routes. The flat
Mm.
ones are a lot easier, but it's just a little bit too boring for me on the trainer if I'm doing an hour-long ride. So I'm definitely going to check out some of these routes.
Definitely, they're great. They're amazing. They're amazing.
So I have one last question for you. So
Yes.
if a cyclist was riding in Tenerife and let's say they have a super busy schedule, they're going with their family, but they
Mm.
really want to ride because they're making the trip out there and they only have one day to ride. What
Yep.
is the route that you would recommend for them?
Um, because of its name, you've got to do Mount Tidy, and I would say do that either one of two ways. You would go either the Western Ascent via Guia de Zora, and it goes from Adeje, or the Southwestern Ascent via Villaflor, and that just simply depends on where you stay. Either route. Sorry, I'm used to my English accent. Sorry, is spectacular. You go through banana plantations, you go through the pine forests on both of them. And if you look back, especially if you do the western ascent and you look back, you have this beautiful curvature of the road, and you can see La Gomera in the middle of the Atlantic. You turn the other way and you see a volcano dead ahead of you. Honestly, that I think the western ascent is my favorite. I think that's what I would go with.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I'll have to get out there one day. It sounds so amazing. And right now, I mean, we just got a foot of snow the other day. I mean, this all these
Ah,
routes sound amazing.
I know that, and that's why we get so many people who want to go to Tenerife. They look outside and it's raining or snowing. You think, I'll do it on ROUVY, and then I need to do it for real.
Exactly, yeah. I'll probably do it this afternoon.
Yeah. Well, let me know how you get on. I bet you're a lot faster than I am.
We'll see. Yeah. Well, that's all from this episode of Ruby Unchained. Thanks for joining us today, Lee. Where can people
Thanks for
follow
having me.
along and learn more about Love Velo?
You can jump on our website, it's lovevelo.travel, or we're on Instagram, which is love_velo_cycling_.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, and thank you for listening. See you next time.
Thanks, Zach.